So this is the Calico community meeting for March 9th, 2022. I'll start us off with some check-ins and sneak peeks. Anyone feel free to jump in if you spot that I'm missing something. Chris, would you like to take notes as usual for us?
Yes, absolutely, I will.
Thank you. So as far as releases go, we just pushed out a patch release, a couple patch releases, but the main one is 322.1, which was last week.
Sorry, can someone hit me with a link? I'm struggling to find it.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
I'll throw that in chat.
Yeah, lovely, thanks.
Is this all right? Yeah. Okay. I just stuck the link in chat. So yeah, 322.1 came out. It had a handful of bug fixes. There was one where for really big clusters, the Taifa connection rebalancing logic was slightly off. So I think that went into 322.1. There was a WireGuard deadlock on startup that we were seeing in some situations. That also went in, so I'm really happy about that one. That was kind of a nasty bug. And then we updated the version of IPset that we're shipping, which was causing some incompatibilities with kubeproxy and IPVS mode. So all three pretty important bug fixes. Along with that, we bumped up base images and fixed some CentOS repository issues so that we get rid of some CVEs and make builds a bit more reliable. So that was 322.1. I'd recommend switching to that if you can, especially if you're impacted by any of those issues. 323 is in the works, so we're in development mode for that, targeting mid-April, most likely at the moment. At a high level, there's like 4 kind of main areas that I'm excited about. We're doing some work on BGP. So there are some features that currently only exist for global BGP peers that we want to make available for full mesh clusters as well. Things like BGP password and the graceful restart timer. And I see that Matt's on the call. He's doing a lot of that work. We're also looking at IPv6 support for VXLAN. This has been another long-standing one that we've seen users asking for. So I'm excited to be able to finally tackle that. And then there's some rumblings upstream in Kubernetes. So there's some advancements in the network policy space there. So there's a new admin network policy API that is supposed to be alpha in the next Kubernetes release. So we're looking at doing some sort of early alpha level support for that, or prototyping of that, and getting that out, to whatever degree is sort of appropriate based on how far along the API is at that point. And then similarly, there was a KEP for network policy status that went in, which we'd like to implement as well. That's sort of a tricky one where I think there is some debate on how valuable we'll be able to make that API. So part of what we want.
What's that one about, Casey?
Yeah, so it's there's this problem with network policy where different providers support different feature sets of it. I think that Calico generally supports all of it. I can't think of any sub features of it we don't, but for a while, for example, we didn't support named ports in network policy, like a long time ago. And I think some other providers, like I think Cilium doesn't support port ranges on network policy. And so right now there's no way in the API for users to know that their implementation doesn't support this. So the hope for this KEP was, okay, network policy providers will start writing back when they can't support something that's in the policy. So at least there's a way for them to report back to the user, hey, we can't action this one. I'm doubtful of its value because, at least for Calico, right, where we try to implement stuff right off the bat, the main scenario that this would happen would be if you're running an outdated version of Calico that doesn't even know about that capability. So it's a little bit tricky we have to think about how we would write that code to like spot capabilities that we don't even know exist or might not exist at the time we wrote the code.
Yeah, so we'd have to work with the raw YAML and stuff rather than the structs that could be out of date.
Yeah, so I'm sure we can figure something out. That's sort of the intent of the KEP. It explicitly calls out that it shouldn't be used to report back whether or not the network policy is like available throughout the cluster. It's not meant to be like a synchronization point where all the nodes check in and report back ready for this. That was the
okay. Yeah, I was wondering if that's what it was.
Yeah. I think everybody sort of jumped on that as a big problem in terms of scalability. So that's an explicit non-goal. So yeah, I think probably some sort of addition to kube controllers that can pull out the raw JSON and check for things that we don't know about would be the way to go there. And like, I guess in theory, there are bugs in our code that we could catch if we return an error or something from our parsing library. But yeah, so that's why I was saying it's sort of in that like experimental phase where we got to figure out how useful this is and what we can do with it. But that's also an alpha. I think that's also an alpha KEP. And then the last thing for 323 that I hope is going to make it, and that we can talk about next, is VPP beta. So we've got Nathan here and Lance here, so maybe I'll let you guys talk a little bit about what's going on there.
Sure, I can start with the VP side of things. So we are still finding bugs and playing with the CI and giving headaches to Lance also. So hopefully it's making progress, and and the number of bugs that we have is getting lower. And yeah, it's a bit hard to measure progress, but because also the number of tests. So we try to activate more tests and cover a wide range of scenarios. So the number of tests increases, which might make our ratio a bit worse than previously. But in the end, it seems like we are solving bugs, which is a good thing. And so we're keeping on that, and hopefully, so we say it was a bit tense to be in 320, but hopefully in a couple weeks, let's say, we should have something more stable that should pass most, if not all, the test cases. I don't know, Lance, if you want to add more color on the CI side of things and the suffering that we impose on you.
No, I think you've covered it. I mean, fundamentally, I increased the number of test cases by like 2 or 3 times by basically going through and finding every test case that might even possibly be relevant and turning it on. And oddly enough, they found bugs. So yeah, we're definitely making progress. Things are definitely improving.
Nice. That's awesome to hear. And I wouldn't worry about Lance. I think he gets some sort of grim satisfaction out of seeing red balls pop up. So you're probably doing him a favor. I think the only other check-ins I want to do, I see Eric's not here to talk about operator stuff, but there were a couple of things I wanted to call out there. So we're doing some work in our docs that has been a long time coming to update all of the steps that differ based on whether you've installed via a manifest or the operator to provide steps for either mode. I think a lot of our docs only included manifest instructions. So you'll see right now they're just going into the master branch, but in 3.23, when we cut the new docs, there'll be tabs in a bunch of places. Those are going to default to the operator instructions, and there'll be an option to also look at the manifest instructions. So that's pretty cool. And then there's also a bunch of issues that we're looking at around manifest to operator migration. I think as people have been starting to use that a bit more and upgrading to use the operator, they've encountered some gaps in that logic. So we've got a small backlog of issues that we'll be trying to pay down in that space as well. I think a lot of them are around IPv6 at the moment. So hopefully keep an eye out for some operator patch releases that include those fixes. Any other check-ins or updates anyone wanted to talk about? Nope. In that case, we can do a quick bout of issue review. I'm gonna share my screen. There are only a couple issues that I think I wanted to talk about today. God, I have way too many tabs open. Hopefully this is the right one. Yeah, so I think we've already identified this one as a bug actually. But I had a user come in a couple weeks ago reporting high load on the API servers in a really big cluster. They were running like, yeah, over 2,000 nodes in this one. And interestingly, it seems to be pointing towards IPAM, I think it was list operations, which is kind of curious, but I guess listing like a 2,000 node cluster worth of handles, for example, is an expensive operation. So yeah, I think as far as triage is concerned, we know this sounds like a bug, but it's an interesting one to look into, and the fix might be kind of involved. I think, Sean, you had talked at some point a long time ago about making like an IPAM server or something on the nodes that can cache this sort of information.
Yeah, I think that type of approach might be the way to go.
Yeah. Hopefully
Still
there's
a
just like
fairly
some
tricky problem, because you don't want to hand an IP over to the CNI plugin and then like have that only be an in-memory thing that then, you know, your daemon crashes and you lost that allocation or anything like that. You want to make sure it was recorded somewhere.
Yep.
So if we did a sort of host local allocation thing, I think that might have been your idea, even with the having files on disk on the host that you write the individual allocations to, and then the block is allocated to a host, and that kind of thing gets written back eventually. Not sure. Yeah, we need to design
Yeah,
it.
certainly a lot of error scenarios to work through.
So my one line of summary of that is IPAM generating excessive API load bug. Is that a fair summary? I missed the very first few words of your description, but I think that's what
Yeah,
you...
that's basically what it is.
Yeah.
And it's only really for very large clusters that this would happen on.
Got it.
I need to dig into the code. I'm so hopeful that there's like some like loop or extra API call that we can get rid of that would mitigate this, but
And Typha's not protecting the API from this because of the number of queries, or
because Typha is only used for watch queries. It doesn't do
got
lists.
Got it. Okay.
And due to the nature of the way the CNI plugin works, it's not a long-lived process. It can't do a watch on this sort of stuff. It needs to query it every time it runs.
Okay.
So like that's kind of what we're getting at with an IPAM server, is that maybe it could be a long-lived agent of some sort that is watching and caching this information, and then doesn't need to call a list to get the whole state of the world every time the CNI plugin's called.
Yeah, perfect. I look forward to seeing the bug in a year's time with the caching agent is not consistent with API.
Yeah. Exactly. It's always a matter of trading one bug for another.
That's why we didn't do it that way straight away. Because if you go right back to the API each time, then it either passes or it fails. And if it passes, we allocated it and wrote it back. And if it fails, then we didn't get it. But yeah, there's certainly things we could cache there, though, like so like things that don't need to be like up to date all the time, and things that are only really hit by each individual node. So there's probably a lot of optimization we could do.
So this next one, WireGuard doesn't configure IPv6. Yeah, it doesn't. I think this is just a known enhancement. In fact, I think it's probably a duplicate. I believe there's another issue open for this. We're looking at VXLAN IPv6 support in 3.23 and hoping that WireGuard is the next domino to fall after that. So I think that's a pretty easy one to triage. Jay is back with an issue. They want to install custom versions of some of the non-Calico CNI plugins. Yeah. I wonder if we still need to be including these at all in our CNI image, to be honest. So we include a bunch of the upstream CNI plugins, which a long time ago was useful because just the state of the installer ecosystem was a little bit sketchy. So you know, it's kind of up to the user to install things like the host device and port map plugins and all the upstream CNI plugins. I think most installers now install those for you. but Calico still ships its own. It does have a nice benefit of ensuring we're running with a set of those binaries that we've tested against. But also it means that we're shipping a bunch of extra code that we might not need to. And if somebody wants to install a custom version of one of these plugins, it's a little bit difficult. So there are some trade-offs there.
Does it have a benefit for us, kind of in terms of like an attack surface thing, if we manage to, if we were to be able to remove that from our code base, or not really?
Not really. I mean, if anything, it's like maybe a way of making sure nobody replaces those plugins with a version that isn't what we expect. But even then, like, we don't monitor them actively to make sure that they're right. We just stick them there at install time. We really just reduce the size of our images and like, I guess, increase our test uncertainty.
Yay, another test dimension.
Yep. But in practice, right, like, I mean, port map is one that has had bugs in it before. The other ones, not really. They don't change much. So,
do we use the others in any way, or are they ones like bandwidth plugin and stuff that some people use? Is that kind of thing we're talking about?
yeah, the bandwidth plugin is one that some people use, and so like is, I think, enabled in the Calico CNI config. The host device one, I think, is called by the container runtime itself, independent of us, even if it's not in our config. Like, we also ship the flannel plugin, for example, which is just not useful for most people, but is there for people running Canal, or at least it used to be. I don't know if Canal actually uses that anymore. I have to double check. So there's like a bunch of extra stuff there. So getting rid of those would fix this. I think we may also actually have an option to say skip installing certain binaries, but it's like real tedious to use. So, you know what, it's not. I still keep going to the micro repos every time I go to look for some code. Install. Skip. Yeah, skip CNI binaries. This is the one. Okay. Oh yeah, this guy. So I think the last two on this list are this bug that we've been seeing pop up a little bit more often now, where people have had clusters running for months and then suddenly they start getting one or two nodes failing to launch pods with this connection is unauthorized message. It looks like a real bug. Don't know why it's happening. We wrote code to handle service account token rotation, but for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to be handling this case, and don't even really know what the case is yet. Doesn't seem to be anything special about this.
Do we need to be careful to differentiate between between like the latest code that's running with that, with that Calico managed CNI option, and people who've upgraded Kubernetes but not upgraded Calico to have that?
We do need to be careful, but most of the bug reports, that's the first thing we say is make sure you're setting this. And we've certainly seen a few folks that even after setting that are encountering the issue, and some folks who already had that set and were encountering the issue. So, from what I can tell, even with that code running that's supposed to handle this case, it's not handling it.
When I dug into, they were running 3.16, which had that option, but the operator wasn't setting the setting. But sounds like, yeah, got newer releases still hitting it as well.
Yeah, I think this one, yeah, this is 3.18, so still a bit old, but at some point around this time frame, we turned it on by default. I can't remember exactly the release, so I would need to double check. Like this user is running 3.21.2, which does have it turned on by default. Yeah, and then like this was a report from a long time ago, and until recently nobody else had been hitting this. And then I think in the last couple of weeks we saw a bunch of people hitting it. So maybe it just like we just got to the all right, I'm happy to upgrade to 122 phase of of sort of cluster lifecycle. It's been out long enough that people are comfortable upgrading. But like, for example, in this one, I think the user reported that if they manually used the kubeconfig that the CNI plugin was using, everything worked. Like if they ran kubectl on the node, passed it the kubeconfig of the CNI plugin, they were able to perform API operations. But the CNI plugin trying to use that same config was getting unauthorized messages. So it's pretty bizarre and needs, I think, some reproduction. I haven't been able to reproduce it. I think it's just because I'm missing some subtle understanding of how the token rotation stuff works.
Could be a Kubernetes bug as well.
Yeah.
Or a Kubernetes misconfiguration.
That would be the first Kubernetes bug we've ever found. Yeah, so I don't think there's a lot to say here, except that if you're encountering this, like, please jump on one of these issues, probably this one, 4857, because it's the oldest, and I think has the most conversation on it at the moment. And I think the things we're looking for are API server logs that might explain a little bit more about why the server is rejecting it, as well as information about whether or not the token's valid on your cluster, Calico node logs that indicate whether or not our rotation code is actually coming into effect. I don't think we've had an issue yet that has all of those attached, so it's sort of piecing together bits from different reports. And ideally, if you could come up with some sort of like easy reproduction, right? Most of these reports are, I had a cluster, it was running for months, and suddenly one node started doing this. And that's sort of difficult to reproduce. So I think those are all the issues. I had a couple other ones to call out. Just going on and on and on about issues. There was a Helm issue that a couple folks reported. Our Helm chart was not super idiomatic with respect to the namespace argument. So we sort of, we hard-coded the namespace in the Helm chart, which meant that the operator was always installed in the same place, but the Helm release itself was installed in the default namespace because you couldn't pass the namespace argument to Helm without it complaining that the chart was hard-coded. So in 3.23, we've got a fix coming up which lets you pass that argument and lets you migrate to like a properly namespaced Helm release in the cluster. I think there were some external tools that were complaining about this and made our Helm chart not work in certain types of CI. So I'm happy we were able to figure that one out. There are some upgrade steps, but they're pretty small and clearly documented in the upgrade docs. Any other issues that anybody wanted to discuss? Looks like a no. I wanted to give a shout out to GitHub user Acceleron. I think their name is Joseph Gu. They put up a pretty awesome PR to modernize some of the versions of various dependencies that the Calico uses that hadn't been updated in a while. And especially tricky ones to update as well, which is probably why they hadn't been updated in a while. So PR 5466 updates etcd and Kubernetes and CNI to the latest releases, includes a bunch of nice cleanups. And I'm super happy that that went in the end of last week. So thank you, Joseph. It was not an easy task, I am sure. Any other shout outs?
Yes, Acerilon. Yeah, it's Acerilon. Sorry, I'm just trying to make a note of that username.
Yeah, ACELERON, I believe is the one.
No, it's not. It's RAL. It's
Oh, you're right. Huh.
yeah. There we go. Got it.
I totally just
Acerilon. Acerilon. Yeah, that's
Acerilon. Yeah, that was me reading too fast.
Regardless, it's awesome. Thank you very much.
Cool. If there are no other shout outs, I think Matt has got a small demo for us here.
Let's see here. So I guess is that people see that? I'm gonna actually zoom.
Looks good to me.
All right, so everybody should see that now, I think. But yeah, speak up if you can't. So I just have a cluster here, and pretty much I'm going to try to demo the BGP additions that are coming in v3.23. So I think Casey mentioned this earlier in this meeting, but essentially we had an issue. Users basically had to choose between going with a global BGP configuration to get the password, so PGP password as well as the max restart time settings, or they go with kind of node-to-node mesh because we had some protections for some restart race conditions there, but we didn't offer both on either side. So now we've done both. We've added the protections on the global BGP peers, which is a whole other thing, and then we've also kind of added the settings for the max restart time as well as the BGP password for node-to-node mesh, which is kind of the default. So so I just have a cluster started here. If I look at the bird configuration, we can see that the node-to-node mesh is pretty much the default value. It's all set up. Its passive on is kind of that portion that protects against the race conditions that I mentioned earlier. So yeah, you can just see pretty much all of that is set up there. And so the portion that we want to look at here is in the BGP configuration. We got two settings here. So the new settings are this max restart time, which pretty much didn't exist prior, and this password, node mesh password field. And I'll go over the secret in a sec, but right now let's just go with kind of the max restart time. So we'll just set it at 10 seconds, make that configurable. Apply that. So when we go look at the bird configuration, we should see that the restart time is there. So very simple. That's all there. And
You probably shouldn't set your graceful restart time to 10 seconds, by the way.
Yeah.
Just as an aside for anybody watching this.
It's a demo.
I've already pushed that to 10 production clusters.
I'm so sorry. And then let me see. Yeah, so that's that part, and we can just add the node mesh password portion here. So I need to, I'm not sure if I got rid of the secret. Oh, I do have it. So actually, well, we can just look at it. So this is my secret that I had applied there. So my secret is in this namespace. Pretty much just saying at A I have password A. So fairly simple there. And so if we actually go back and look at my BGP configuration, you'll see that reference the secret, reference that key there, which was A. So I should theoretically get back password A as the BGP password in there.
Probably shouldn't use password A for your production cluster either.
Well,
Yeah, it's too long. Just go with password.
I mean, at least it's not password 123.
Yeah, it's got no uppercase or or digits in it, Matt. Like capital P password 123, surely.
That'll fix it. Okay, so I reapplied that, and if we go and look at the bird configuration there, didn't go in. That's unfortunate. Let's see. Oh, that's fun. Okay. So this is something else I think I need to go and change later, but let's see. I guess, yeah, I need to work this out, but in our cluster role that we standardly book with all your installations, you probably are not getting access to secrets. So I'll just add that here for demo purposes, just like we have weird passwords and weird restart times. So probably should use that, but
the operator is probably going to reset this change too, right?
yeah, it'll probably restart it in a sec, I think, but let me see if I can.
I mean, it's gonna, we'll find out.
Looks like something happened. Okay, well, it hasn't restarted it yet, so there we have it. So yeah, as we had kind of gone through before, yeah, it set the password. That one that I had configured for it was the super secure password A, and yeah, that shows up here as well as that restart time. So yeah, that's, I guess, yeah, we can see it on all the node to node mesh peers here. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Super short. See that
Go.
need to go and edit that cluster role a little bit too, but yeah, that should be it.
Yeah, I think our docs for the password actually have you create a cluster role for that, because we don't want to just blanket give every cluster read on secrets.
Yep.
Because most clusters don't need it, but you
Yeah.
can create like an additional cluster role and bind it, or yeah, bind it to the Calico node service account. And I think you can do that even just for the specific secret that you reference in your secret ref. So you're only looking at the bare minimum that you need to.
Yeah, ideally you would reference just that secret, but I didn't do that super safe either. So yeah, that's good. Not for any production clusters. So yeah.
Wonder if there's any way to get Bird not to need it in a file. There'll definitely be users who don't want that.
Yeah, I mean, BGP password is not really a security feature to begin with, because it uses MD5. It's more a configuration validation type thing is how I see it. So people shouldn't be expecting that this makes their BGP traffic, you know, opaque to anybody who might be snooping it.
Yeah, it defends against a particular type of attack where you can disrupt BGP by sending bad packets. So it's like an anti-DOS measure.
There are also people who need to turn it on because their compliance docs say they have to use the best available features. You know, so we're still enabling those people, even if it stores it in a file.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not saying it has no use, but you should be aware that it's using a broken algorithm just by nature of the BGP spec. Cool. Well, thank you, Matt, for implementing that and for demonstrating it. I've got nothing else on my agenda. Were there any other topics anybody wanted to talk about?
I actually want to take a minute to introduce our new ambassador program. So we created Calico Big Cats as an ambassador program for open source project Calico. And the purpose of the ambassador program is to basically get everyone together who are enthusiastic about project Calico itself and its community. The goal is to help people have a platform for collaboration and learning and solving all these Kubernetes issues by experience sharing. And the role of a Big Cat is to be a resource of Project Calico for the community members, help their local Calico users learn more about Project Calico, and also it's a preference, but if they want to represent Project Calico publicly, whether it's at events as a speaker or on social media, that's also an opportunity. And anyone who is interested in learning more about the Big Cats, you can find it on our website, tiger.io. And if you search for Calico Big Cats, it should be there.
Very cool. And that has instructions on how I can apply to be one if I wanted to be one.
It does, yes.
Nice.
Yeah,
Maybe
you
I'll
have to
sign up.
you have to start at the bottom and work your way up, Casey.
Shoot. Cool. Well, I think that is the end of our meeting today. Thanks everybody for coming and for watching. And our next one will be, as usual, the second Wednesday of the month for whatever reason. So that's April 13th, it looks like, just before the 323 release. See y'all next time.